the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results? I think that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related, and that is not to discount the problems with use and abuse. Half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend on the courts, and half of what we spend on the prisons is drug related. About $70 billion a year. And what are we getting for that $70 billion a year? We're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. I always point out that that's arresting the population of New Mexico every single year. I'd like to put a face to those 1.8 million arrests. You know, we have this notion somehow that things are getting a little bit better, that the government is looking at this a little more rationally, that we're really not arresting people for possession. But the reality is this. I met with a guy in Des Moines, Iowa about 3 weeks ago. This guy was not a criminal. In his mid-30s, he had been arrested and charged with possession of 1 gram of marijuana with intent to distribute it to his 17-year-old daughter. You know, the unfunny part of this is that he was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in jail. And he had just spent the last 14 months in jail. That's the face of those 1.8 million arrests in this country. There are 30 million Americans, I think, that have been subject to the criminal justice system in this country since this drug war began. Those are 30 million Americans that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. I think that we should legalize marijuana. That's what I think. And as you know, it's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, do harm to others. It's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car. It's never going to be legal for kids to smoke pot. Hey, it's on the ballot in California, Proposition 19. Yeah! This is really an opportunity to change nationwide drug policy. I really believe that it's going to be the domino that's going to bring about rational drug policy nationwide. Among other things, it's going to take the money out of marijuana. It's estimated that the cost of marijuana in California will drop from $390 an ounce to $39 an ounce. That's taking the money out of marijuana. And why is it that this country can't connect the dots when it comes to border violence with Mexico? It's estimated that 75% of the border violence with Mexico is marijuana related. Drug cartels activity is 75% marijuana. Legalize marijuana and you take the money out of marijuana. Play these disputes out in the courts rather than with guns. 28,000 drug deaths south of the border. Can't we connect the dots? This is prohibition. I don't drink alcohol, but I've drank alcohol. I don't smoke marijuana, but I've smoked marijuana. And I will tell you something that you all know. There's a big difference between marijuana and alcohol. Marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. Citizens of Denver voted 5 years ago to decriminalize marijuana on a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. About 500,000 Denver citizens agreed with me on that one. It's always been my contention, and I have maintained that marijuana should be legal since 1999 when I started my second term as governor of New Mexico. I have always maintain that legalizing marijuana will lead to less overall substance abuse in this country. We need to recognize that Holland, which has effectively decriminalized all drug use, has about 60% the drug use as that of the United States. That's among kids, that's adults, that's marijuana, and that's hard drugs, and again, that's on a per capita basis. We need to recognize that Portugal 10 years ago decriminalized all drug use, and as a result of that, 10 years later they can show a 50% reduction in heroin use in their country. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, and that's on a per capita basis. This is crazy. Among developed countries, we have 4 times the incarceration rate of number 2 country, New Zealand, on a per capita basis. This is crazy. I want to applaud all of you for your advocacy. I want to challenge all of you here over the next few years because I think this issue is at a national tipping point. 2.5 years and more than 50% of Americans will support the legalization of marijuana. But we all have a role to play in this, and that role is to just be very common sense, reality-based, discussing, cussing with fellow citizens in presenting this argument in the most logical way possible. I applaud all of you for your advocacy. I just implore you to continue that advocacy and let's push this issue over the line. This country becomes a much better country overnight when police can go out and actually enforce real crime as opposed to victimless crime. Thank you very much.
Hey, Dennis, start a Gary Johnson for President chant.
Gary Johnson for
Run,
president.
Gary, run.
Run, Gary, run! Run, Gary, run! Run, Gary, run! Run, Gary, run!